Hi, my name's Renata. Welcome to my YouTube channel, which is dedicated to three main areas: intercultural communication and expat life, business skills and job search across cultures, and foreign language learning. As a coach working with expats and international teams, I often coach people on how to communicate across cultures. One of the main topics we discuss is meetings, presentations, and negotiations. So I thought I'd make a video about negotiating across cultures. Negotiations is a topic that fill entire university classes, and I know you can take a course elsewhere to become a really proficient negotiator. But if you were wondering what are the most important, the essential skills and ability when negotiating across cultures, well, then I've got just the right video for you. As always, in my videos, I will share my slides and you'll see me again at the end of this video. So here we are discussing negotiating across cultures. But before moving on to the cultures part, let me just clarify something about negotiating. So there are two ways we can look at negotiating. There's always two parties or more. And let's say I have my checklist, you have your checklist, and we start negotiating. So I could see it this way that I have my goals, my interests, and I want everything on my checklist. And I don't really care about your goals and your interests and your checklist. All I want is win and get what I want, and that is called the win-lose approach. However, we do know that negotiating is definitely more of a give and take. So the other approach would be to say, yes, we have our two checklists, and we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and I get something and you get something. And in the end, we realize that we have shared interests and goals, which is also known as the win-win approach. Therefore, we could define negotiating as the intention to reach an agreement that both parties are willing to accept, assuming that at least some of the parties' interests align, or that a certain degree of leverage can be used to achieve a deal or compromise. What makes this different from negotiating across cultures simply is all of that, but bearing in mind cultural differences. Now, when we look at all the skills and abilities that it takes for being a good negotiator, what would be the most essential skills for negotiating across cultures? Well, I put together 5 of those skill and abilities for you. And skill or ability number 1 would be intercultural communication skills. This is a broad topic, and I have other videos on that broad and general topic. So, in general, we need to bear in mind that when communicating across cultures, we need to become aware of customs, traditions, rituals, patterns, norms, beliefs, and values of the other culture. What is it that in the other culture is so recognizable and is being reinforced and rewarded? We need to watch out for the 3 R's of the other culture. Knowing how to do that and understanding the different layers of culture is going to create a skill of intercultural communication. When we talk about culture, I just want to make that clear. It's not just national culture between countries. There could be regional cultural differences. There could be differences in professional culture, in gender, ethnic, or class culture, religious and philosophical culture, generational culture. We all have our corporate culture if we work for large corporate organizations, and we all have our personal culture, or known as personality. That is something you want to be able to take into consideration and also expand your horizon and ask the why beyond the what to gain a new perspective and avoid misunderstandings. Just to give you a couple of examples what those misunderstandings could be, it could be direct versus indirect communication, how directly I say things, how indirect I have to be polite, or is direct rude? That kind of misunderstanding is called direct versus indirect communication. I have a different video on that too. Expressive versus restrained behavior. How much of my emotions can I actually show? Am I supposed to show my emotions? Is that going to create trust in the other party? Or is it just a nuisance and I'm not taking this seriously because I'm showing my emotions? Maybe I should be more restrained, more of a poker face. Yes or no? How much? That's the big question. Also, how task or relationship oriented is the culture? Do I have more of a poly or monochronic approach to time, how we see time? Also, power distance, how much of it is there, and is it more of an egalitarian or a hierarchical culture that I'm negotiating with? Individualism versus collectivism, and how we make decisions in a more consensual or in a more top-down decision-making way. Also, when it comes to presentations, do we prefer an application first or principle first approach? And many other topics. So check out a couple of other videos I have in general on introduction to intercultural communication or specifically on presentations, or there's also something on direct versus indirect communication if you want to know more about this number one skill of intercultural communication. Skill or ability number two is persuasion and active listening. I call it the art of persuasion. The art of persuasion is to make people hear you out or listen to you, understand your point of view, be more receptive to your suggestions, and if you're really good at that, maybe even you can change their beliefs and attitudes. This allows you to propose certain things, like the proposition of fact. It's always about true, false, right, or wrong. Whatever you suggest, whatever you propose, the other party may have a different opinion. You say this is true, they say no, this is false. You say this is right, you say this is wrong. So this discussion, the proposition of fact, is one thing that requires the art of persuasion. There's also the proposition of value. And when we say value, we mean monetary value and other benefits. How can I add value to what I offer or to what I'm asking you to do? And finally, the proposition of policy, which is the desire to agree and take action on whatever it is we're negotiating about. Always bearing in mind is what attitude does my audience have? What is the overall negotiating situation? Is it receptive to the art of persuasion? Is it rather neutral? Or is it even hostile? You definitely want to bear that in mind what you're walking into. So the art of persuasion, how you propose what you want. Remember, my checklist, that's one side. The other side is the art of active listening. That's your checklist and what you want. So you also want to make sure that you hear them out and you let them speak, that you understand their point of view, that you be more receptive to their suggestions. And who knows, they might change your mind, and hopefully you can adjust at least a little to the beliefs and attitudes of the other party. As you're going through this, process the information, evaluate it, reflect on it, and amplify it. This will allow you to become a better active listener, because active listening is about paying attention not just to the language, but also to non-verbal language, not just what you hear, but what you see and feel, what you can read between the lines. Pay very good attention to all of that as you're listening. Also, that you show value of the speaker's input. Whatever it is that they want, even if you're not willing to give it, at least show that it has value and that you respect their position. And finally, make sure you ask related follow-up questions. Questions that make me think, oh, nice, you were actually listening. And that's the art of active listening. Skill or ability number 3 is emotional intelligence, the balance of the heart and the brain. Or, as it is defined in the Merriam-Webster, the ability to recognize, understand, and deal skillfully with one's own emotions and the emotions of others. Why is this important for intercultural negotiations or negotiations across cultures? Well, because of a tendency for even being very expressive or very restrained when it comes to emotions. Like I said before, am I supposed to express my emotions or be more of a restrained negotiator with a poker face? That is the big question. Also, how do I deal with feedback, positive and negative feedback? What is the tendency to agree or disagree? Do people actually say yes and no, or are there alternatives ways of saying no? Have the emotional intelligence to understand what's going on and what is expected. It has also to do with your way of problem solving and conflict management, two skills that will become necessary at some point of the negotiation. Skill and ability number 4 is confidence. Now you probably say, how is that important? Is that something I can learn? Well, I usually recommend that you prepare a lot, that you feel really prepared. You have a lot of planning that goes into it because preparation plus planning equals confidence. At least a certain level. You should have a certain level of confidence that's essential. You shouldn't feel like you're completely unprepared, you're trying to wing it. But there are definitely cultural differences in terms of how confident you should be. Are you the cat or the lion? Do you pretend to be the lion? Is it necessary to pretend to be the lion? Is it expected or is it too much? I'm the cat, I'm the cat. So, are you confident or is it considered arrogant because it's too much? If you're humble, is it considered honest with integrity, or because there's a lack of confidence, might you be considered incompetent? What is the expectation in the other culture? You definitely want to do your preparation and your planning when it comes to that. What level of confidence should you exude? With confidence comes the attitude that anything is possible, or the attitude that this is unlikely and realistically this would be better, and so on. A lot of confidence probably comes with the idea that anything is possible. Of course, we're going to find a solution. Yes, trust me, we'll take care of it. Does that really instill confidence and trust in the other party? Or do they think you're lying because they don't trust you can really do it? Would they have preferred a more realistic, down to earth approach? Once again, that's the question: how much confidence and which resulting attitude should you display in a negotiation? There's also an individualistic versus a collectivistic approach. Individualistic means you use the pronoun I or my or mine, versus collectivistic approach that uses the pronoun we. So do you say that my opinion is, and I believe, and I'm responsible for, and I guarantee that? Or do you say, oh, we as a company, we as a team, we would like to, we promise, and so on? The I versus we approach and using we can actually seem not very confident to people who prefer the I approach, because why do you have to hide behind your group? Why can't you just tell me what you personally think? And so I versus we, or individualistic versus collectivistic approach, can create a bit of an inconsistency here when it comes to confidence in negotiating across cultures. Also, how do we build trust? I mentioned trust building as a very important part of negotiating, and there's the so-called peach versus coconut approach. In intercultural communication, we often use the peach and the coconut as a comparison of two kind of opposing ways of building trust. Just imagine a peach, very sweet and soft on the outside, very quick and easy to eat, meaning trust is given fairly quickly and fairly easily. But when you hit the core, that's where it ends. Whereas the coconut is pretty hard to crack. You need time and skill and maybe tools to get in. But once you're in, you're in. Trust is given unconditionally. Now, which approach is preferred? Are we going to follow the peach approach, meaning a quick chit chat back and forth, and then we sort of decide we trust each other and we go ahead, the peach approach? Or does it require a long time, extended negotiations back and forth, and you feel like nothing is going ahead, nothing is moving on? But that could be the coconut approach. So be aware which of the two principles a culture might prefer. And this definitely leads us to the last one, ability or skill number 5, patience and the perception of time. If you're a peach and you're negotiating with a coconut, you're in for a long ride, for sure. So the question is, what's your perception of time? How much time are you willing to invest? What's normal from your point of view in terms of how long this negotiation might take? And also in your culture, is time a scarce commodity? That means you have to speed up. There's a sense of urgency. Let's quickly conclude a contract and move on? Or is there always enough time because we're actually very much interested in building a long-term relationship? So the peach and the coconut very much have to do with the last skill or ability, patience and perception of time. Also, when you're coconut and when you want to move on when you're peach and you want to move on fairly quickly, that sense of urgency, maybe the other party is considering that rushing and not sincere. Or if you take your time for bonding, for long-term relationship building, is the other party maybe considering it stalling and not interested? There could be tons of misconceptions why it's taking so long or why you're trying to rush it. Overall, the question really is, are we wasting time or are we building a relationship? That is a huge question to consider when involved in intercultural negotiations. Now, how can you prepare? Here are some final considerations for your preparation. You should do your research. Find out everything you can about the company, the person, the culture. Do a little bit of self-awareness checkup. Your own protocol, your rituals. How does it compare with your negotiating partners' protocols and rituals or culture? There will be a gap, and think about it and how you intend to bridge that gap. Also, is there going to be a language gap? What is your native language? What is the negotiation partner's native language? Can you use the same language, or are you using a lingua franca, which is a foreign language for all participants? Or is one of the parties, are they native speakers of the language and the other party is not? That would definitely put the other party at a disadvantage for whom the negotiation language is not their native language. So think about these things and how they would impact the negotiation. Also, anticipate that in addition to verbal communication, the words, the spoken words in the language, there will be nonverbal communication. Depending on the country and culture, there will be a lot more or a lot less. So become aware of that and how this could impact the negotiation. And also, do you have long or short-term interests? Ask yourself, Am I a peach or a coconut? And what do I want out of this? So these are a lot of the, let's say, more international, intercultural considerations. But for negotiations in general, you should definitely become aware of the following as you prepare for your negotiations. Know what you want. Know your own leverage in this negotiation and your priorities, what you're willing to sacrifice. At the same time, try to anticipate what's going on in the other party's mind, their own desires, what they want out of it, their priorities, their leverage, and what they might be willing to sacrifice. You can anticipate that. That's excellent preparation. Also remember our skills and abilities, number 1 through 5, which was intercultural communication skills, the art of persuasion and active listening, emotional intelligence, confidence, and patience or the perception of time. And finally, know when to walk away and know when to give in. These are probably the most basic things to consider for any negotiation anywhere on this planet. Feeling confident? Are you ready to start your negotiations? Or do you have any questions? Do you need a coach? Well, I'm easy to find. Look for my name, Renate Urban, or my company name, Urban Training and Services. You can visit my website or contact me on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch. I hope this has given you a very good quick overview into the world of negotiating across cultures. If that's your situation, if you need to work with a coach, if you want a coach to come and work with your entire team, I'll be more than happy to. Contact me and I'll be glad to work with you. Enjoy the videos about intercultural communication, foreign language acquisition, and so on, then come back to my channel. There are new uploads on a regular basis. Subscribe to the channel, stay up to date, and welcome to the community. Thank you for watching and have a great day.